All right, guys, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about female lower body fat protocol. Okay, we're going to be talking about one of the more interesting topics in female specific fat loss, and that is why females store fat the way that they do. Okay, so this lecture is going to be all about female fat distribution. Okay, so female fat distribution. So we know what this is. Men, they have it a little bit different from women. Okay. They have a different way of storing their fat, right? As we've talked about, the sort of apple shape instead of the pear shape, from the men to the women kind of fat distribution. Men store around fat around the middle. You women tend to store fat lower down in the hips, butt, and thighs. Okay, and one of the things that really frustrates women is, in general, is that even oftentimes when they try to lose weight or burn fat, what they find happening is that their upper body gets smaller than their arms get smaller, their waist gets smaller, but their hips, butt, and thighs tend to stay the same. Okay. And in some cases, they actually get bigger, or, they do change, but they don't change to the same degree as what the change in the upper body does. Okay. And so I want to give you a little bit of a background on why that is the case and what you can do to deal with that so that you can achieve a more sort of like a balanced physique. Okay. So the first thing that you need to understand is that a little bit about the cells, right? The how they different from men to women. And what I want to do, or what I have done, is I've drawn out for you the different shape of, I know this isn't very big, but hopefully you guys can see this. So you have the different shape of a man, he's a V shape, and then you have the shape of a female, right? Okay. So, and I just want you to look here, where that green is, that is what women have, this thing called beta receptors. Okay. And all this green, there's a lot of beta receptors in the hips, butt, and thighs area. Or sorry, not beta receptors, alpha receptors. Okay. And what I want you to do is think of alpha, stay at A for alpha, A for anti-burn. Okay. And women have a lot more alpha receptors than men have. Okay. So men, they tend to have more beta receptors, which you can think B for beta, B for burn, and they just have a lot more beta receptors in their physique, okay? Whereas women tend to be more in the hips, butt, and thighs, okay? And so what happens is these receptors, they sort of give you the ability to burn fat readily or hold on to fat, okay? They affect the fat burning in those particular areas. And so what you guys need to understand is that when it comes to the alpha receptors in the women's physique, alpha receptors in the women's physique, is those alpha receptors are turned on even more predominantly when estrogen is high, and also when insulin is high, okay? And so this is why it is so important for women to understand why carbohydrates are so much more important than just calories, right? Than just monitoring calories. Because if you are taking in a lot of carbohydrates, your body will not have the ability to burn those alpha receptor cells in the hips, butt, and thighs if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates. Likewise, it's estrogen is great in the fact that it does help you burn fat. It is a global fat burner, and it helps create the small waist and the hourglass shape. However, when estrogen is high, it turns on these alpha receptors. It's kind of like a floodgate. And so when estrogen is high, the gate is closed. All right. It's like estrogen's here. We're holding on to all our fat, right? We're in the building phase. And when estrogen is low, then the floodgates open. And when these floodgates open, this is your ability to do some high intensity work and burn some and target fat from the hips, butt, and thighs specifically, which is pretty freaking cool if you know how to use it, right? And so women just have a lot more of these alpha receptors in the lower body than they do the beta receptors. So they have, they have a ton of these receptors sitting on the cell and only a few of the beta receptors in the lower body. And that's like on average. Not all women are like that. Obviously, not all women store, have a lot of like fat storage in the hips, butt, and thighs. But typically that is the way it is on average. And that's why when you start to change your diet and you begin to exercise, you begin to go on a fat loss plan, it's going to be, slow. It's going to be slow going in the lower body because you have all these alpha receptors, okay? And, part of the reason that is because estrogen, the hormone estrogen for females tends to upregulate these receptors in the lower body, okay? And so that is one of the reasons why that happens with women, okay? And so what we want to begin to do is talk about female specific lower body fat removal, right? And that's obviously, what we want to be doing. How do we remove the stubborn body fat from the lower part of the body? All right. And so there's a couple things that you want to be keeping in mind. One, lower carbohydrate intake, right? Because what I say about those alpha receptors, they are turned on when estrogen is high, and also insulin. So if insulin is high, you aren't going to be able to release fat from the fat cell very readily. All right. So we want to be focusing on a lower carbohydrate intake during this time, right? During this low estrogen time, right? And then the second thing that we want to be doing is we want to be stimulating catecholamines, right? Because they drive fat burning. And what are catecholamines? They are the hormones that are released when you do high intensity exercise, right? They bind to your beta receptors, and they just help fat release. So anytime when you're like bent over and breathless, right, and panting from working out, you're releasing a lot of catecholamines then. So that's a good thing. And you want to be doing that in a fasted state because, again, we want low insulin levels, right? Okay, so that is the second thing that we want to be doing. And then the third thing that you want to be doing is pre-workout supplements. This can help, right? As long as you got diet in check and you have stress management in check, you can go ahead and start to add on some pre-workout supplements such as tyrosine, caffeine, and yohimbine, okay? And so all three of those things, plus then there's also forskollie and green tea extract that you can add on, which are just more supplements, okay? But the pre-workout supplements, you are going to want to make sure that those are taken on a fasted stomach. I would take just all of them on a fasted stomach, okay? So this is something that you guys want to keep in mind. This is the lower body fat protocol, and we would use this protocol. When would we use this protocol? I'm going to ask you guys, when do you think we would use this lower body fat protocol? It's going to be when estrogen is low. So when is estrogen low? In the phase 4 and in phase 1, right? Okay, but here's the thing. We don't want to be going hard all the time because we can't get so caught up in hormones, guys. We have to remember that like the big moving blocks, like if you're stressed out, you're not burning fat. So number one, remember mindfulness on the bottom of the 4M pyramid, mindfulness, then it's movement, then meals, then metabolic. So mindfulness first, then after that, so I would say make sure that you're still getting a deload weekend. You're still doing phase 4. You're still pulling back. You're still doing your mindfulness on, taking a deload week on phase 4 so that you can push in phase 1 and target a lot of these, these stubborn body fat areas where you have a lot of alpha receptors. Okay. All right. So we would be mainly doing this lower body fat protocol in phase 1. That is where you would want to do that. Okay. And again, you're going to be thinking around, 75 or 100 grams of carbohydrates or less. If you're a bigger female, probably 100 or less. But obviously, remember, trying to keep HEC in check is number 1. So priority number 1. And then, so that means minimizing a lot of like starches, fruits, and stuff like that. And then after that, a lot of fasted, like that HIIT, getting a good 10-minute HIIT workout in, maybe a little bit longer if you're feeling good and you're feeling super well rested. And then getting your strength work and then walking. Okay, so that's going to be your protocol along with the supplements that I did recommend. Okay, so this is the female phase training, as you guys know. So basically, remember, you are going to be doing this lower body fat protocol in phase 1, the early follicular phase when we push, because it is important that we still. It's important that you pull back at some point, during these 4 weeks. And I prefer it to be in the late luteal when cravings are really high and stuff like that. So rather than trying to exercise in phase 4 and trying to fight with willpower, I prefer you do the lower body fat protocol in phase 1. Okay. All right. So that's going to be it for that. Hopefully you guys can have a cool understanding of, how fat loss distribution works with women and how you can really accelerate fat loss from stubborn body fat in the lower body.